The security guard's hand was already reaching for his phone to call the police when Marcus stood there, soaking wet, his daughter shivering beside him, trying to explain why he'd broken into his own workplace at 6 in the morning. His boss stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said the words that would change everything. "You're fired, Marcus. Effective immediately." Before we continue with what happened next, if you love stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit that subscribe button for kindness tales. Drop a like on this video and share in the comments a time when someone's kindness changed your day. Now, let's find out how Marcus ended up in this impossible situation. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus Chen was doing what he did every morning at 5:15. He was packing his daughter Lily's lunch in their small apartment kitchen while she ate cereal at their worn table. The 7-year-old was telling him about a project at school, something about the solar system, and Marcus was only half listening because he was mentally calculating whether they could afford poster board and markers this week. Since his wife Emma passed away 2 years ago from cancer, every decision came down to math. Rent, food, Lily's after-school care, the ancient car that barely started, Emma's medical bills that still arrived like ghosts in the mail. Marcus worked as a logistics coordinator at Westfield Supply Chain Solutions, a massive warehousing company on the edge of town. He'd been there for 6 years, reliable as sunrise, never missed a day even when Emma was in the hospital. His shift started at 7 sharp, and his boss, Derek Paulson, had made it crystal clear that tardiness wasn't tolerated. Derek was the kind of manager who seemed to enjoy reminding people that they were replaceable, who timed bathroom breaks and wrote people up for being 3 minutes late. That particular morning, Marcus dropped Lily at her before-school program at 6:30 and headed toward work. The highway was its usual crawl, red taillights stretching into the gray dawn. He was making good time until he saw her. A woman stood beside a car pulled halfway onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. She was visibly pregnant, one hand on her back, the other holding a phone to her ear. Even from his lane, Marcus could see she was in distress. He should have kept driving. He had 20 minutes to get to work, and the warehouse was still 15 minutes away in good traffic. Derek's voice echoed in his head from last month's meeting. "I don't care if your grandma's on fire, you show up on time or you're out." But Marcus thought of Emma, thought of how terrified he would have been if she'd been stranded and pregnant and alone. He pulled over. The woman's name was Sarah, and her water had just broken. She'd been trying to reach her husband, but he was in surgery and couldn't answer. He was a doctor and had his phone off during procedures. The hospital was 30 minutes away. Her contractions were 7 minutes apart and intensifying. She looked at Marcus with tears streaming down her face and said she didn't know what to do. Her car had overheated and died right as the contractions started. Marcus didn't think. He just helped her into his car and started driving. He called his work from the road, got the receptionist, explained he'd be late because of an emergency. She said she'd pass the message along. Sarah gripped the door handle through contractions, breathing hard, apologizing over and over. Marcus kept telling her it was okay, even as his mind raced with worry about his job. He'd already received 2 warnings this year, once when Lily had a fever and he'd been 20 minutes late, once when his car wouldn't start and he'd arrived 15 minutes behind. He got Sarah to the emergency entrance at 7:45. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Sarah grabbed his hand before they wheeled her away and said, "Thank you, I don't even know your name." He told her, watched them disappear through the automatic doors, then stood there for a moment in the circular drive, his hands shaking with adrenaline. When he finally got to work at 8:30, Derek was waiting at the entrance. The conversation was short and brutal. Derek didn't want to hear about the pregnant woman or the emergency or the hospital. He said Marcus had been warned, that the company needed people who took their commitments seriously, that there were 100 people who'd love to have his job. He had security escort Marcus to his locker to collect his things. Just like that, 6 years of loyalty dissolved in 15 minutes. Marcus sat in his car in the parking lot, his daughter's crayon drawing of their family stuck to the dashboard, Emma smiling in purple marker, and tried not to fall apart. He had $800 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Lily needed new shoes because her toes were cramping in her current ones. He'd lost his health insurance. He drove home in a daze, the reality settling over him like ice water. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. He applied to every job he could find, but logistics positions wanted immediate starts and he kept having to explain the gap in employment. Retail and food service couldn't match his previous salary. He was scraping together freelance delivery driving, but it barely covered groceries. Lily asked why he was home so much, and he told her he was between jobs, that everything would be fine, even as panic clawed at his chest every night after she fell asleep. Then, on a Tuesday morning, there was a knock at his door. A woman in a professional suit stood there holding a folder. She introduced herself as Jennifer Marks, an attorney, and asked if she could come in. Marcus's first thought was that this was about Emma's medical debt, that they were finally coming to collect. His stomach dropped. But Jennifer sat down at his kitchen table and said, "I'm here on behalf of Sarah Mitchell. You helped her 3 weeks ago on Highway 42. Do you remember?" Marcus nodded slowly, confused. Jennifer continued, "Sarah asked me to find you. She wanted to thank you personally, but she also wanted me to look into what happened after. She learned you were fired that day." Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment. "It's not her fault. I made the choice to stop." Jennifer opened her folder. Sarah Mitchell is the founder and CEO of Mitchell Industries. They own Westfield Supply Chain Solutions, among 30 other companies. When she found out one of her employee subsidiaries fired you for helping her, she was, in her words, absolutely furious. Jennifer slid papers across the table. "She's offering you a position as Regional Operations Director at Mitchell Industries headquarters. The salary is triple what you were making. Full benefits start immediately. There's also a signing bonus to help with any financial difficulties you experienced during unemployment." Marcus stared at the papers, the numbers swimming before his eyes. He looked up at Jennifer. "I don't understand. I just did what anyone would do." Jennifer smiled. "That's exactly the point, Marcus. Most people didn't stop that morning. Sarah counted at least 40 cars that passed her before you pulled over. You risked your job for a stranger. Sarah built her company on the belief that character matters more than anything. She wants people like you leading her teams." The job was real. Marcus started the following Monday at a gleaming office building downtown. Sarah met him personally on his first day, her newborn daughter sleeping in a carrier on her chest. She shook his hand and said, "You saved us that morning. Now I want to make sure you and your daughter have the security you deserve. Emma would want that for you both." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes, and Sarah just smiled kindly. Within 6 months, Marcus had moved Lily to a better school district. They had a small house with a yard. Lily's solar system project, the one she'd been talking about that morning so long ago, won first place at the science fair, and Marcus was there to see it. He framed the blue ribbon next to Emma's picture in their new living room. Sarah became more than a boss. She became a friend, someone who checked in on Lily, who shared parenting stories, who reminded Marcus that doing the right thing always mattered, even when it cost you everything. Especially then. Derek, Marcus heard through former co-workers, had been let go shortly after Sarah learned about what happened. The company implemented new policies about emergency situations and employee compassion. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create ripples we can't imagine. Marcus stopped for a stranger because it was right, not because he expected anything in return. But kindness has a way of circling back, often when we need it most. We live in a world that constantly tells us to look out for ourselves, to keep our heads down, to not get involved. But what if the opposite is true? What if stopping for someone in need, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs us something, is exactly what opens the doors we never knew existed? Marcus could have driven past Sarah that morning. Most people did. But he chose compassion over convenience, and in doing so, he found that the universe has a way of remembering who we are when no one's watching. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell us about a time you stopped to help someone, or when someone stopped to help you. Sometimes, sharing these moments is how we remind each other that kindness is still alive and worth fighting for, every single day.